I only have a few dollars, Jasmine whispered, her voice trembling as she held the bottle of milk. Her hand shook slightly, the plastic slipping between her fingers before she steadied it. Renee, her 2-year-old daughter, clung to her hip, small hands gripping the edge of the blanket she always carried. The little girl's wide eyes darted around the store, curious yet cautious, reflecting the unease Jasmine carried with her. The fluorescent lights above buzzed faintly, casting an almost sterile glow over the shelves stacked with cereal, snacks, and canned goods. Jasmine's heart raced as she approached the counter. She tried not to draw attention, careful to keep her head down. She had spent years avoiding notice, surviving quietly while carrying the secret of Renee's parentage, the secret of a love torn apart by a dangerous world. From the end of the aisle, Jai-Won froze. The world seemed to narrow, the noises of the store fading into a hum behind his pounding heartbeat. That voice, soft, hesitant, yet unmistakably Jasmine's, struck him like lightning. Memories came rushing back. The warmth of her laughter, the sharp sting of their arguments, the nights when love had felt eternal and fragile at the same time. His eyes widened as they followed Jasmine, her careful movements, the gentle way Renee leaned against her. And then he noticed the child. Every feature of Renee, the curve of her lips, the shape of her nose, the wide, expressive eyes was unmistakably his. Time itself seemed to stop. It can't be, it has to be. He stumbled forward slightly, gripping the edge of the shelf for support. His legs buckled beneath him, and he sank to his knees mid-aisle. His mind spun with disbelief, wonder, and an ache he hadn't realized still existed. He had searched for them, prayed silently for years, never letting hope die completely. And now there they were, standing in front of him in a tiny convenience store, a bottle of milk between them that suddenly felt inconsequential. Jasmine froze, hand hovering in midair as the bottle nearly slipped from her grasp. Fear and recognition flashed in her eyes. Could it really be Jai-Won? After all this time? And why was he here kneeling like this? Her breath caught, her chest tightening. You shouldn't be here, she whispered, voice cracking with tension. Renee, sensing the sudden storm in the air, blinked up at Jai-Won with innocent curiosity. She didn't understand the complexity of adult emotions, but she understood attention, care, and intensity. She reached her tiny hand toward him, a tentative gesture that somehow connected him to her instantly. Jai-Won's voice was barely more than a whisper, trembling with emotion he could not control. "It's her! It's really her!" he murmured, staring at Renee as if willing the impossible to be real. Every ounce of his being wanted to reach out, to touch them, to confirm that this miracle, this child, was truly his. The store owner, noticing the tension but misunderstanding it entirely, cleared his throat nervously. Do you want me to take the bottle?" he asked, hesitating. Jai-Won didn't answer immediately. His gaze remained locked on Jasmine and Renee. The world around him, the cluttered aisles, the buzzing lights, the mundane items on the shelves, had faded into irrelevance. Nothing mattered but the sight of the two women who had become the center of his life in ways he hadn't realized until this very moment. Finally, he spoke again, voice breaking with years of longing and suppressed emotion. I didn't know, I didn't know she existed." Jasmine's heart tightened. She had expected anger, disappointment, maybe even indifference, but not this raw, overwhelming mix of awe, guilt, and longing. Her lips trembled as she tried to form words. I had to protect her. I didn't know if it was safe to tell you," she admitted softly. Jai-Won swallowed hard, his chest rising and falling rapidly. He wanted to say something comforting to erase the years of absence, to promise that nothing would hurt them again. But words felt inadequate, tiny compared to the magnitude of the moment. He lowered his hand slightly, hovering near Renee, unsure if she would accept him. May I hold her?" he asked, voice soft, tentative, almost reverent. Jasmine's eyes flickered between him and Renee, torn. She wanted to protect her daughter, yes, but she also wanted Jai-Won to recognize the truth, the bond that had formed naturally between them. Slowly, she nodded. Carefully, she handed Renee over. "Hello, family. What will you do if you find yourself in such a situation like this?" Drop your opinion in the comments, and also tell us where you're watching from so I can send you special regards. And also, hit the subscribe button to subscribe to this channel. Now let's dive deep into the story. Renee looked up at him, her small hands clutching his fingers. Instantly, he felt the connection he had longed for, a bridge across the years lost, across the nights of wondering, across the pain and separation. He cradled her gently, holding her as if she were the most fragile treasure in the world. And in that moment, Renee responded, leaning into him instinctively, a tiny, unquestioning gesture of trust and love. For a long moment, no one spoke. Time itself seemed to pause. Memories of the past, love, anger, joy, and loss crashed over Jaiwon in waves. Every heartbeat, every breath, carried the weight of what had been lost and the impossible joy of what had been found. Jasmine's lips quivered. I never thought you'd find us," she whispered. Jaiwon's voice broke as he replied, "I never stopped looking, I never stopped hopping." His eyes softened, and he looked at Renee with reverence. I may have missed years, but I won't miss her life anymore. I promise I will protect both of you, always." Renee's tiny fingers curled around his hand. She didn't understand the words, but she understood care and safety. In that small, innocent way, she accepted him. But even as joy surged, the shadow of reality lingered. From the corner of the store, a subtle movement caught Jaiwon's eye. A figure lingered near the security door, someone watching too closely. He tensed immediately, protective instincts flaring. The reunion was miraculous, but the world outside their fragile bubble had not vanished. Threats, whispers of danger, old enemies, they might still exist. Jasmine noticed his gaze and followed it, eyes narrowing. A shiver ran down her spine. "Someone's watching," she whispered. Jaiwon nodded, jaw tightening. "We'll deal with them, but not yet. Right now, this." He gestured to Renee in his arms, to Jasmine beside him. "This is everything." The bell above the store door had long stopped jingling, but in Jaiwon's mind, the echoes of the past filled every corner of the small convenience store. He remained on his knees, holding Renee close, feeling the tiny weight of her in his arms, the small rise and fall of her chest as she breathed. Every feature of the little girl screamed familiarity. Her lips, the curve of her eyebrows, the tilt of her head. It was undeniable, she was his daughter. His child, the living embodiment of love and loss he had never fully reconciled. Jasmine stood a few steps away, her posture rigid, shielding Renee with her body as if by doing so she could prevent any emotional or physical harm. Her heart was racing, caught between the relief of seeing Jaiwon again and the lingering fear that this moment could shatter at any second. How did you find us?" she asked quietly, her voice a mixture of disbelief and caution. I didn't," Jaiwon admitted, voice low, almost fragile. "I searched for you, yes, every day, every month, every year, but I didn't know where you'd gone or if I'd even find Renee. And now," his words trailed off as he looked down at his daughter, fingers brushing against her tiny hand. "Now I see her, and I see you, and it's all real." Jasmine's eyes widened. Years of pain, uncertainty, and fear washed over her in a sudden rush. You really didn't know," she whispered. Her tone carried a lifetime of skepticism and hope entwined. "You had no idea she was yours." Jaiwon shook his head slowly, the tremor in his hands betraying the intensity of his emotions. "I didn't. I swear I didn't. If I had known, I would have." His words broke, choked by the weight of regret. He swallowed hard and looked directly at Jasmine. "I would have never let you go, not for a second." Renee shifted slightly in his arms, gazing up at him with innocent curiosity. She didn't understand everything, of course. She had not lived through the years of separation, the dangers, or the complicated love that had preceded her existence. But she understood attention, warmth, and safety, and she instinctively leaned closer, pressing her tiny cheek against his chest. Jasmine's voice softened, almost a whisper to herself as much as to Jaiwon. "I had to protect her, I had to leave, or it would have been worse for all of us. I didn't have a choice." Her eyes, glossy with unshed tears, locked onto his. "I didn't want to hurt you, I didn't want to lose her, but I couldn't risk either." Jaiwon's jaw tightened. He had once lived in the world that forced Jasmine away, a world of power, threats, and loyalty tests. He understood her fears now more clearly than ever. "I know now," he said quietly, voice thick with emotion. "I see why you had to leave. I can't take back the years I lost, but I can protect her now. And I will. I promise nothing will harm either of you as long as I can stop it." For a few long seconds, the only sounds in the store were the faint hum of the fluorescent lights and the soft breathing of Renee. Time seemed to stretch, holding them in this fragile bubble of reunion, hope, and tension. Jasmine's hands trembled as she finally allowed herself to relax slightly, but the worry lines remained. "And what about them?" she asked quietly, almost afraid to speak the words aloud. "The threats, the clan, the people who made me leave." Jaiwon's gaze hardened, the sharpness in his eyes betraying the calm exterior he usually maintained. "Gone is a strong word," he admitted, "but no one will touch you again, not while I am here. I will deal with the past. I will deal with anyone who dares to harm my family. You don't have to be afraid anymore." A small sigh escaped Jasmine's lips, a mixture of relief and disbelief. For years, she had carried the weight of solitude, threats, and the fear of being hunted. Now, standing in front of the man who had once been her everything, and who was now her daughter's father, she could finally allow herself a flicker of hope. Renee, sensing the subtle tension between the adults, leaned closer to Jaiwon, pressing her small hand against his chest. Her innocence, her trust, and her immediate acceptance of him struck a chord deep within both parents. For a moment, nothing else existed. No past regrets, no danger, no loss, only the small, undeniable love radiating from the child between them. Jaiwon's gaze shifted from Renee to Jasmine. Years of unspoken words and unresolved feelings hung heavily between them. "I know it's complicated," he said softly. "I know I missed so much and I am sorry, but I want to be here. I want to be part of her life, and I want to be part of yours if you'll let me." Jasmine's breath hitched. She wanted to believe him desperately, yet caution was ingrained in her. She had survived by staying alert, by doubting, by assuming the worst. I want to believe you," she admitted, voice quivering. "But it's been so long, Jaiwon, how can I know you'll protect us?" He knelt a little closer, his eyes unwavering. "Because I can't stand losing you again. I won't. I may have failed to be here for the years that matter, but I will not fail from this day forward. I swear it on my life, Jasmine, on Renee's life." The air seemed to shift, the tension easing slightly as Jasmine's eyes softened, the first real warmth she had allowed herself in years. She reached out, her hand brushing lightly against his, and for the first time since their separation, Jaiwon felt the possibility of connection again. "We can't stay here long, but we can find a place where no one can reach us, a place to start over together." Jasmine hesitates, torn between caution and hope. "A place to start over, are you sure it's safe?" Jaiwon's voice hardens with determination. "It will be, I swear it, I will make it safe." Jaiwon glances at Renee, who smiles innocently at him. He feels the weight of responsibility, the joy of reunion, and the tension of imminent danger all at once. He knows that life has changed forever, but whether for good or peril, only the coming chapters will tell. The streets of New York were alive with noise, but Jaiwon's mind was focused entirely on Jasmine and Renee. The city seemed distant, almost irrelevant, as he led them down narrow sidewalks, every step measured, every glance scanning for danger. He still held Renee's hand gently, while Jasmine walked beside them, her eyes alert, scanning their surroundings. Jaiwon could feel the weight of the years pressing down. So many questions had been left unspoken. So many truths had been buried under fear and necessity. Now, standing here, he realized that the past would not stay buried forever. To secure the future for Jasmine and Renee, he would have to confront it head-on. He stopped for a moment at the edge of a quiet street, pulling Renee closer. Her small hand clutched his, and she looked up at him with innocent trust. "Daddy?" she asked softly, tilting her head. The word pierced him like a sharp arrow. Renee had called him Daddy, and it was real. His heart throbbed with emotion, a mixture of awe, relief, and guilt for all the moments he had missed. "Yes, Renee," he said, kneeling briefly so that he was eye level with her. "I'm your dad." The child's face lit up with a smile, and she reached up to touch his cheek. The simple gesture broke something open inside him, a dam of emotion he had been holding back for years. He wanted to hold her forever, to protect her from all harm, but he also knew the world they were in would not allow complacency. Jasmine watched silently, unsure whether to trust the unfolding moment. She had lived in fear for so long, fearing the reach of the clan, the enemies, and Jai One's world. But seeing him interact with Renee, seeing his eyes soften and his hands careful and gentle, she allowed herself to believe, if only for a moment, that maybe, just maybe, he could be trusted. Jai One turned to Jasmine, voice low but firm. "We need to talk about everything. Why you left, why you never came back, and the threats that forced you away. I need to understand so I can protect you and Renee properly." Jasmine's gaze dropped to the pavement. She could feel the weight of years pressing down on her shoulders, the fear, the secrecy, the loneliness. "There are things you don't understand," she said quietly. "Things that would have put both Renee and me in danger if you'd known. Leaving was the only way to survive, the only way to keep her safe. And I couldn't risk you getting hurt too." Jai One's jaw tightened. He had long suspected the challenges she faced, but now the truth hit him with crushing clarity. His daughter, the girl he held, had been raised in constant vigilance, protected by a mother who had endured threats he had never fully realized. The enormity of that responsibility, of what Jasmine had carried alone, made his chest ache. "I see it now," he said softly, voice trembling. "I see what you went through to keep her safe, and I'm sorry I wasn't there. I'm sorry for the years I lost, but I will make this right. I will protect both of you no matter what it takes." A faint smile broke across Jasmine's face, fragile but hopeful. She wanted to believe him. She needed to believe him. I hope so, Jai One. Renee deserves a life without fear. I've done my best to give her that, but maybe now together we can do more." Jai One nodded, determination hardening in his eyes. "We will. I won't let anyone touch her, not now, not ever. And if there are people from the past who try," his voice lowered, dangerous and steady, "they will regret it." As they walked further down the street, Renee skipping slightly between them, Jai One's mind shifted to action. He would need to track the threats, neutralize them, and secure a home where Jasmine and Renee could live safely. But first, he needed to establish trust, not just with Jasmine, but with Renee as well. Later, as they returned to the apartment, Jai One suggested they create a small routine, something steady for Renee, something to anchor them all. Morning walks, bedtime stories, shared meals, and even playful afternoons in the park. Each small ritual became a thread in the tapestry of their newly reclaimed family life. In the kitchen that evening, Renee climbed onto a chair to help Jasmine prepare dinner, giggling as she spilled flour over her small hands. Jai One laughed, a rich, relieved sound he hadn't allowed himself in years. It was the first true sense of normalcy they had experienced since their reunion. Yet, even as the warmth of home wrapped around them, a subtle tension lingered. Jai One had noticed the brief flicker of movement outside the apartment window earlier, an unidentifiable shadow that had disappeared as quickly as it appeared. Danger was never far in their world, and he vowed silently that he would not allow it to touch them again. As Renee climbed into bed that night, Jai One and Jasmine sat together on the living room couch, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. He reached for her hand, intertwining fingers with a tentative warmth. "I know it's been hard," he said quietly, "and I know trust isn't given lightly, but I promise I will never let anything happen to either of you. Not now, not ever." Jasmine leaned her head against his shoulder, the first real sense of comfort she had allowed herself in years. "I believe you," she whispered, her voice trembling but sincere. "For Renee, for us." They sat in silence for a moment, listening to the quiet breathing of the child sleeping in the next room. For the first time, all three of them felt a sense of peace. But the subtle tension outside, the invisible threats lurking in their world, reminded them that their family was still fragile. Their new life had begun, but the shadows of the past could still strike at any moment. Evening had settled over the small apartment, soft orange and pink hues spilling across the city skyline through the window. Renee had long since fallen asleep, clutching her blanket and hugging her favorite stuffed animal. Jasmine and Jai-Won sat quietly in the living room, the gentle hum of the city outside mixing with the low rhythm of their breathing. For the first time in years, they had a moment to pause, to breathe, and to confront the emotional scars that had shaped them both. Jasmine's hands rested nervously in her lap. She had carried so much alone, years of fear, threats, and isolation. And now Jai-Won sat beside her, not as the man of power she had once known, but as a father and partner, willing to face the past and protect them both. Her throat tightened, and she finally broke the silence. Jai-Won, I need to tell you everything. About the threats, the warnings, why I left, why I couldn't tell you about Renee. You deserve to know the truth. Jai-Won turned his head toward her, his gaze soft but unwavering. I want to know, Jasmine. I need to know. I can't protect you or Renee fully without understanding the past. His hands rested gently on hers, grounding her as she braced herself to relive years of pain. Taking a deep breath, Jasmine began. When the clan made you the new boss, they told me I couldn't stay. They said I was a risk. They didn't want a black woman around, and I knew if I stayed, they would make life dangerous for Renee. They threatened me, silently, subtly, enough that I understood. I had to leave, Jai-Won. I had no choice. I wanted to tell you every day I wanted to tell you, but I couldn't risk your life or hers. Jai-Won's chest tightened, each word hitting him like a punch. He had known she left, but he hadn't realized the depth of her sacrifices. His throat constricted with guilt. I didn't know. I thought you left because of me, because of us, because I failed. I didn't realize the danger. Jasmine shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. It wasn't your fault. You didn't fail. I had to protect our daughter. Every day I wondered if you were safe, if I'd made the right choice. I never stopped loving you, Jai-Won. Not once. But I had to survive for Renee. Jai-Won's own eyes filled with tears. For so long, he had blamed himself for her absence, for the years lost, for every moment he couldn't be there for Renee. Now, hearing the truth, the weight of those years of misunderstanding pressed down on him, and he felt both guilt and awe at Jasmine's strength. You were incredible, he whispered. Renee is alive and happy because of you, because of your strength and love. The room seemed to breathe with their emotions, heavy and charged. The silence that followed was thick but comforting, a rare moment of understanding and connection. Jai-Won reached over and gently held Jasmine's hands in his. I can't change the past, he said softly, but I can be here now. Every day, every moment I will be here, and I will protect you both. I promise. Jasmine looked at him, searching his eyes for sincerity. She saw it raw, unfiltered, unwavering devotion. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to hope. I believe you, she whispered, a small smile breaking through. I hope Renee can feel it too, that she knows she's safe with us. Jai-Won leaned forward, pressing his forehead gently against hers. She does, and she will, always. As they sat together, reflecting on the past, Jai-Won couldn't help but think about the dangers still lingering outside their walls. The threats hadn't disappeared entirely. He had seen the shadowy figures, the eyes watching them from afar. But now, armed with truth, love, and determination, he knew he could face them, not alone, but as a family. He spoke quietly, almost more to himself than to Jasmine. The people who made you leave, the ones who threatened you, I will deal with them. I will make sure nothing ever comes close to harming Renee or you again. I won't let history repeat itself. Jasmine's gaze softened. I want to trust you, Jai-Won, and I want to believe that we can have a real life now, for Renee, for us. Jai-Won nodded, feeling the first true sense of purpose in years. We will have a life without fear, without hiding, but it will take time and it will take courage, and I will be there every step of the way. They spent the rest of the evening talking, recounting small memories from before the separation, sharing fears, hopes, and dreams. Every story, every confession was a thread sewing them closer together. Jai-Won learned of Jasmine's fears, the quiet resilience she had cultivated, and the ways she had protected Renee from the harshness of the world. Jasmine learned of Jai-Won's endless search, his regret for lost years. and his unwavering desire to make amends. By the time Renee stirred in her sleep, they were still talking, their bond deepened by truth and shared vulnerability. Jaiwon gently kissed Jasmine's forehead, whispering, "We're stronger now, together, and nothing can take that away." But even in this quiet moment of healing, the subtle awareness of the city outside remained. Jaiwon's instincts would not let him relax fully. He knew the shadows from the past lingered. He glanced toward the window, scanning the streets below. A figure might be watching, waiting. Danger was patient, and it had not forgotten them. The morning sun spilled through the apartment window, casting warm golden streaks across the hardwood floors. Jaiwon sat at the small dining table with a notepad, pens scattered around him, outlining plans, schedules, and contingencies. For years, his life had been dictated by danger, power struggles, and loyalty tests. But now it was different. He had Jasmine and Renee, and he would do everything in his power to ensure their safety and happiness. Jasmine moved about the apartment, tidying up, placing small touches that made the space feel more like a home. She paused, watching Jaiwon with a mixture of admiration and cautious hope. The man who once commanded fear and respect now seemed entirely devoted to something far more powerful, family. "You're really serious about this," she said softly. Jaiwon looked up from his notepad, his eyes warm but determined. "I've never been more serious about anything in my life," he replied. "This isn't just about keeping Renee safe. It's about giving her a life she deserves, normal, happy, free from fear. And it's about giving us a chance to be a real family." Jasmine approached him, sitting down across the table. "I want that too, Jaiwon. I've dreamed about it, even when life felt impossible. But how do we start over without the past catching up to us?" Jaiwon tapped the notepad thoughtfully. "We take it step by step. First, we find a place where no one can reach us, somewhere private but livable in the city. Then we establish routines, school for Renee, safe routes, people we can trust. And finally," he hesitated, glancing at her with a soft intensity, "we reclaim our lives, our happiness together." Jasmine nodded slowly. The idea of stability, of safety, of a life without constant fear filled her with both relief and trepidation. "It's not just about survival anymore," she whispered. "It's about thriving for Renee, for us." Renee, meanwhile, played in the living room with her toys, occasionally glancing at Jaiwon and Jasmine. Every giggle, every small gesture reminded them why this was worth fighting for. She was the bridge between past regrets and future hope, a tangible reason to move forward. Jaiwon stood, walking over to Renee. "Hey, princess," he said softly, "do you want to help us make our new home perfect?" Renee's eyes lit up. "Yes, Daddy," she exclaimed, running to him. Jaiwon lifted her gently, spinning her around once before setting her down, laughter and delight filling the room. Jasmine watched, a smile tugging at her lips, feeling the warmth and potential of a life built together. Once Renee was occupied again, Jaiwon and Jasmine began mapping out their plan in earnest. They researched safe neighborhoods, schools, and clinics, discussing what would be best for Renee's growth and safety. They even considered hearing discreet security, a measure Jaiwon insisted on despite Jasmine's initial hesitation. "We can't afford to be careless," he said, voice firm. "Not anymore." Jasmine agreed, realizing that Jaiwon's approach wasn't about control, it was about protection. For the first time, she allowed herself to fully trust him, to believe that together they could navigate the challenges ahead. I think we can do this," she admitted softly. The afternoon passed in a blur of planning and small victories. Jaiwon found a temporary apartment in a quiet, secure area of New York. It wasn't luxurious, but it had space for Renee to play and grow, and it felt safe. They toured the apartment together, imagining their lives unfolding there. Renee explored every corner with wide-eyed wonder, her laughter echoing off the walls, making the space feel alive. By evening, they sat together on the floor, surrounded by maps, lists, and little notes, their hands occasionally brushing, their shared glances heavy with unspoken promises. Jaiwon looked at Jasmine, eyes reflecting both love and resolve. "This is just the beginning," he said quietly. The world outside may still try to interfere, but inside these walls we are free, we are safe, and we are a family. Jasmine leaned against him, resting her head on his shoulder. For the first time in years, I believe it. But even as they celebrated their small victories, Jaiwon's mind remained alert. The faint shadows of the past still lingered. Someone had been watching them before, the mysterious figure near the store, the occasional flicker outside the apartment. He knew instinctively that the world he had left behind would not simply vanish. The past had a way of catching up, and he needed to be ready. That night after Renee was asleep, Jaiwon stood by the window, scanning the streets below. The city lights twinkled innocently, but he knew better. Somewhere eyes were watching. Someone remembered him, remembered the power he wielded, remembered Jasmine and Renee. He clenched his fists, determination blazing. "Not this time," he whispered. "No one will touch them, not ever." Jasmine approached quietly, wrapping her arms around his waist. "What are you thinking?" she asked softly. "Just planning," he replied, resting his chin on her head. "Planning for a life where fear doesn't rule us, where Renee can grow up without hiding, where we can finally live." Jasmine nodded, allowing herself to believe. "I want that too, more than anything." The next morning brought a calm that felt almost surreal to Jasmine. For the first time in years, she woke without the gnawing fear that someone would come for Renee. The sun spilled through the blinds in soft golden stripes, illuminating the small apartment that had begun to feel like home. She watched Renee sleeping peacefully, the child's tiny chest rising and falling, and felt a warmth she hadn't allowed herself to feel in far too long. Jaiwon was already awake, standing by the window, his eyes scanning the streets below. He had insisted on taking the first watch of the day, a quiet ritual that had become a necessity. He had always been a protector, but now that role carried a personal weight, one that no longer concerned only the clan or business, but the life of his daughter and the woman he loved. Jasmine approached him quietly, resting a hand on his arm. "You can't watch everything all the time," she said softly. "Renee needs us both, and you need to rest too." Jaiwon turned to her, a faint smile touching his lips. "I know," he admitted, "but I can't shake the feeling that someone is still out there, watching. It's instinct. It's what kept me alive in the past, and now it's what will keep Renee safe." Jasmine nodded, understanding that part of him would always be vigilant. "Then let me help," she said. "We're in this together, that's what family means." He looked at her, eyes softening, and finally allowed himself to relax slightly. "Together," he agreed, a word carrying both promise and weight. Later that day, they ventured outside for the first time without masks or pretense, walking through quiet streets to the nearby park. Renee ran ahead, her laughter echoing through the trees, chasing after squirrels and butterflies. Jaiwon and Jasmine followed, hands brushing occasionally, sharing small smiles that were almost shy in their intimacy. "Daddy, look!" Renee shouted suddenly, pointing to a small pond where ducks floated lazily on the water. Jaiwon knelt, holding her hand as she approached the edge, careful not to let her lean too far. Her joy was infectious, and Jaiwon laughed, feeling the tension in his shoulders ease just a little. Jasmine watched him, her heart swelling. She had known this man in a different life, a life filled with danger, power, and secrets. But seeing him now as a father, as a protector, as someone who had devoted himself entirely to them was different. It was grounding. It was real. "Jaiwon," she said softly, once Renee had wandered off to chase a butterfly, "I need to ask, can we really trust this piece? That danger is gone." He took her hand, turning to face her fully. "Trust takes time," he admitted, "and I can't promise the world will be safe, but I can promise that I will face whatever comes. I will not let anything harm either of you, and we will build our life carefully, deliberately, so we can live without fear." The honesty in his voice, the determination in his gaze, was a balm for Jasmine's years of solitude and worry. She nodded slowly, allowing herself to believe in the possibility of safety, of trust, of a real life together. But the peace was fragile. As they returned to the apartment later that afternoon, Jaiwon noticed subtle signs slight disturbances in the hallway, a shadow moving across the adjacent building, the faintest hint of being observed. He remained calm outwardly, but inside the familiar tension of vigilance surged. He was a man trained to read the world, to anticipate threats, and he couldn't ignore even the slightest irregularity. Jasmine noticed his subtle shift. "Still seeing shadows?" she asked softly. He nodded. "Yes, and I won't ignore them, but this time we're prepared. We have each other, and I know who to trust." That evening, as Renee slept, Jaiwan began drawing up a more comprehensive plan. Not just a temporary routine or safe location, but a long-term strategy. They would establish secure channels for emergencies, a network of trusted allies, and protocols for every possible threat. Each decision, each detail, was about ensuring that Renee could grow up safely, that Jasmine could finally rest, and that their family would remain intact no matter what the past tried to drag back into their lives. Jasmine sat beside him, watching him work. "You've changed," she said quietly, almost to herself. "You're not just a protector anymore, you're building something real." Jaiwan smiled faintly, eyes never leaving the page. "I've realized what matters most," he admitted. "Power, threats, control, none of it compares to this." He gestured toward the bedroom where Renee slept. "This little life and the woman who gave her to me, that's everything." Jaiwan sat by the window, eyes sharp and vigilant, scanning the streets below. Every shadow, every flicker of movement, every sound was analyzed. The past had taught him that danger never announced itself. It waited, patient, hidden, ready to strike. Jasmine sat quietly beside him, holding Renee in her arms. The little girl had been sleeping, but now she stirred, sensing the tension. "Daddy," she mumbled, eyes half closed. Jaiwan immediately shifted, gently lifting her into his arms. "I'm here, princess. Nothing will touch you." Renee nestled against him, trusting implicitly, and Jaiwan's chest tightened. Every instinct screamed to protect, every thought focused on ensuring her safety. "You're mine," he whispered softly, "and I'll never let anyone hurt you or your mother again." Jasmine placed a hand on his arm, her touch grounding him. "I trust you, Jaiwan," she said quietly. "I've never trusted anyone like this before, but I know you'll protect us." He nodded, appreciation and resolve reflected in his gaze. "I will. This ends tonight. Whoever been threatening us will learn that we are not vulnerable. We are family and we are united." The sound of footsteps in the hallway made both adults tense. Jaiwan moved swiftly, positioning himself between Jasmine, Renee, and the door. He held Renee protectively, his other hand ready. From the shadows emerged a figure, familiar, dangerous, a reminder of the world Jaiwan had once ruled. "You've been busy," Jaiwan said calmly, his voice low but commanding. "Watching, waiting, but you miscalculated. You didn't count on me protecting my family." The figure smirked, but there was hesitation in the movement. Jaiwan's presence was formidable, even in the quiet apartment. Years of experience, precision, and strategy were evident in every measured breath and glance. Jasmine stepped forward slightly, standing beside Jaiwan. "You're not harming us," she said firmly. Her voice carried strength, courage born of years of survival. "Not now, not ever." Jaiwan's eyes locked on the intruder. "Leave, now, before this becomes more than a warning." The figure hesitated, realizing that the family was not just protected by Jaiwan's power, but also by a bond and determination that could not be broken. Finally, after a tense moment, the figure retreated, disappearing into the shadows. Jaiwan exhaled slowly, his body relaxing just slightly, but his vigilance never waned. "They'll think twice now," he said quietly, turning to Jasmine and Renee. Jasmine's eyes were wide with a mixture of fear and relief. "That was intense," she whispered. "But you were right, you protected us." Jaiwan placed Renee on the floor, holding her hand. "Always," he said simply. "No one touches this family, not ever." For the first time in years, the apartment felt truly safe. The shadows outside still existed, but Jaiwan had shown them and himself that this family would not be intimidated. He had rebuilt trust with Jasmine, claimed his role as father to Renee, and established their home as a sanctuary. Over the next days, Jai-Won implemented more security measures, discreet surveillance, trusted allies watching from afar, and secure routines for daily life. Renee began attending a small, safe school nearby, her laughter and curiosity thriving in an environment free from fear. Jasmine finally allowed herself to breathe fully, seeing the girl she had protected for so long flourish in safety. Evenings became a time for connection rather than vigilance. Jai-Won and Jasmine cooked meals together while Renee played nearby, laughter echoing through the apartment. Story time became a cherished ritual, with Jai-Won reading to Renee, his voice animated and full of warmth. These ordinary moments, once impossible, became their greatest treasures. One night, after Renee had gone to sleep, Jai-Won and Jasmine sat on the balcony overlooking the city. The lights twinkled like distant stars, a vast canvas of possibility stretched out before them. Jasmine rested her head on Jai-Won's shoulder, feeling the strength and protection he embodied. "We've come so far," she whispered. "I never imagined we'd get here." Jai-Won kissed her forehead gently. "Neither did I, but here we are, together, and nothing will ever take this from us again." They sat in silence, savoring the peace they had earned, the family they had reclaimed. The past had tried to keep them apart, had forced sacrifices and long years of separation, but they had survived. They had fought, endured, and finally, they had triumphed. As they looked down at the city streets, Jai-Won's mind was already planning for the future, not with fear, but with hope. Safe neighborhoods, routines, schooling for Renee, and the slow, deliberate building of a life free from shadows. Every decision was guided by love, every action by the determination to protect the ones he cherished most. Jai-Won looked at Renee sleeping peacefully, then at Jasmine, and finally at the city that stretched endlessly before them. No more running, no more fear. We are a family, and we are safe. Yet even as he spoke the words, the faintest movement across the street caught his trained eye, a subtle reminder that the world was never truly without danger. But now they were ready. Together they were unstoppable. The end.